Hello, hello, hello. 6.9 function operations. Please note that in this 6.9 function of operations, there's a part A and a part B. First, part A. So when we have functions of operations, we have things like this. Remember, this is just like a name of a function. This is a name of the function. If I were to say this out loud, this is saying the function of f of x. This is saying the function of g of x. So it's a different way to name an equation, just like how we all have names to name individual people. We're going to get into if we have two different functions, adding them, subtracting them, multiplying, and dividing. Now, this one right here, we will have domain restrictions with because the fact that you cannot divide by 0. Remember that golden rule from way back when? So let's get into it, shall we? So if I'm looking at this, here's my function of f, here's my function of g. What this is saying to you is saying function of f plus function of g. Now this is the same thing as this. So when I go back up here, these are two different ways that you can write out the composite or the function operations. So when I'm doing this, I can say here's my function of f plus my function of g. Now, once you write out this statement, then you have to see if there's anything that you can combine. So these two are the exact same. They're just x's. I cannot combine this one because that's a square root, so they're not the same. So this is 4 plus 1. So this would give me 5x plus the square root of x plus 7. Now, a lot of times people say, what if I wrote it in a different order? Typically, you write it with your highest degree first. So like this is the first, and then write down, but I will still accept that. Now, if I'm subtracting, now this is where people always will make a small mistake. It's saying this whole function of f, subtract this whole function of g, okay? Now, here, I didn't do anything else because when I add, it doesn't matter the order in which I add, you will still get the same answer. But now, when I subtract, I have to make sure to put this in parentheses because when I'm subtracting this whole function, not just that first term. So a lot of times people forget that when you are subtracting a function, you have to distribute that negative sign. So if 4x plus 7, this becomes minus square root of x, and this becomes minus x. Same thing, I look to see anything I can combine, and I can combine these two. Again, now I have 4x minus x, and that would give me 3x. I have to subtract square root 7 and a plus 7 right here. Sorry, square root x. Right now, I want you to try to pause the video and I want you to try to do B by yourself. For the first one, here's my function of f. Here's my function of g. And I didn't write parentheses because when I had adding, it's not changing the sign. Okay, when you're adding, you're not changing any sign. That's not opposite of. So I combine my 8 and my -3 and I get 5. When I subtract, I put parentheses in because subtraction actually means opposite of. That's what subtraction is saying. It's the opposite of what's there. So I have to make sure to have the opposite of my x and the opposite of my -3. Now I can combine those like terms and I get 11. Now we're getting to multiplying and dividing. So when I multiply, when you're multiplying, you're saying that this times this. And if I were to write that out, then you can either use the box method or you can FOIL. I'm going to go over the box method just because the next problem that you're going to do by yourself, it will be much easier to do with the box method. But you choose how you wish to do it, however you may want. So I multiply to get inside the box. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times 3 is 3x squared. This is negative 9x. This is negative 27. So if I write out my four terms I have here, I have x cubed plus 3x squared minus 9x minus 27. Then I look to see, can I combine anything? And actually on this one I can't. So this right here is my final answer. When I'm multiplying, I take these two functions and then you have to remember, multiply each one of these times each one of these. Now, for this, it's a little bit different. Here's my function of f. So I have my x squared minus 9 divided by x plus 3. First, you're going to have to factor this. You're going to have to try to factor that top portion. So I have to think, what are the numbers that multiply to get -9 that add together to get 0? Multiply to get -9 that add together to get 0 would be 3x and negative x. I'm sorry, x plus 3 and x minus 3. Sorry. You also have to look at this bottom part. Now, this bottom part is still going to stay there, but this bottom part cannot be equal to 0. This is a domain restriction because we cannot divide by 0. We can't do it. So if I want to figure out what x can't be for my domain restriction, that's what x cannot be, I have to say that this can't be equal to 0. So this is saying that x cannot be equal to -3. If it does, then it's undefined. Now I'm going to see if I can simplify this at all. Well, because of this multiplying in between here, you can cancel, but this all has to stick together. You can't just cancel out a 3 and a 3. It has to be the exact same on top and bottom. Now, if I wanted to, so if I want to show you, when you're multiplying, I could go x plus 3 over x plus 3 times x minus 3 over 1. Okay? Now, because of this multiplication, I can do that because that's the math in there. These two cancel because this is equal to 1. Anything on top of itself right here is equal to 1. So these two would cancel, leaving me with just x minus 3. So my answer is x can't be equal to -3. And then when I simplify that fraction, x is equal, or x minus 3 is my final equation. I want you to pause the video and try to do B by yourself. Again, you're only failing if you don't even try to do it. So personally, because it's a trinomial times a binomial, I'm going to multiply using the box method. So if you did not start this yet, write this down and try to multiply using the box method. So here are all my terms from the box method. Now you could also FOIL this out. If you really wanted to, you definitely could have FOILed this out. Oops. So I'm going to write out all of my terms from the box method. If you were to FOIL it out, you would go this times this times this, and then go this times this times this, this times this, this times this. Either way, you would get all of these terms. Now, actually, I can combine here, and I can combine here. Well, awesome, possum. Negative 33 plus 3 would give me a negative 30x squared. Negative 11 minus 12 will give me a negative 23x, and minus 4. Okay, second one. I know it's a little bit more of a doozy, but I want you to try to do it yourself. So here's my function of f. Here's my function of g. So I need to factor this. Now, not always, but often, this is kind of a hint to try to factor. So what I did, I don't know what my answer is. I don't know if this is factored yet. But I used whatever on bottom to try to factor this. So 3x times this has to be my x squared. So 3x, I'm going to try to fill this in to see if I can get this equal. And then 1 times this number should be equal to 4. So if I look at that, 1 times, let's say, -4. So this is me guessing. Now if I check this right here would give me a negative 12x. This right here gives me a positive 1x. And together that gives me negative 11. So that does check out. So I use this to help me factor. So first step is to always factor. Now I want to look at this bottom portion. If I look at that bottom portion, that's the part that cannot be equal to 0. Why? Because you can't divide by 0. So if I want to see what x cannot be equal to, because this whole shebang cannot be equal to 0, I first would subtract over the 1, and then I would divide over the 3. So x cannot be equal to negative 1/3. And now I see if I can simplify. So again, with this multiplication, you can, if you want to, rewrite it. If that's more visually appealing to your brain to rewrite it, you definitely can. But I also noticed that this whole thing can cancel with this whole thing, leaving me with just x minus 4. So my answer here would be this two-part of it, my simplified equation and what x cannot be equal. And last but not least is looking at function of operations when I have multiplying and subtracting both combined. So if I were just to rewrite what this says 4 times my function of f. So my whole function of f is 3x squared minus 11x minus 4. So that's this part, minus 2 times my function of g. Now I need to multiply and simplify. So first I have to multiply in my 4, my negative 2. So multiplying the 4 times all 3 terms, negative 2 times all 3. Now I have to look to see if there's anything I can combine. Those are both x's. These are both whole numbers, so I can combine those. I'm not doing anything with that x squared. Negative 44 minus 6 would give me a negative 50x. And negative 16 minus 2 would give me negative 18. And there you have it. And that's Part A. Have a great, have a grand, and have a wonderful day.